At Christmas dinner, my wealthy grandpa passed each of us a check. My parents laughed. It's just for show. A phony check again, I grinned, slipped mine away. Next morning, the bank called. Only one check cleared. Grandpa just said good. Now I know who's real. Could you imagine realizing your entire life, everything you believed about your family, was built on a foundation of lies, all thanks to a single, unassuming white envelope? This isn't just a story about money. It's about a betrayal so profound, it shattered the perfect, meticulously crafted facade my parents had maintained for 30 years. It was Christmas dinner, the air in my parents' extravagant home thick with the scent of pine and roasted duck, a polished, forced cheer that always felt more like a performance than a celebration. The crystal glasses gleamed, reflecting the soft candlelight, but the real sparkle was about to vanish. That night, Grandpa Arthur, looking utterly exhausted, slid 3 pristine white envelopes across the gleaming mahogany table, and with that quiet gesture, everything I thought I knew began to crumble. "A little Christmas gift for each of you," he murmured, his voice barely a whisper against the clinking of silverware. My parents, Robert and Michelle Vance, dissolved into laughter almost instantly. My mother, Michelle, rolled her eyes, her smile tight, a knowing smirk. "Oh, Robert, are we doing the pretend check thing again? So cute." My dad, Robert, chuckled, swirling the expensive wine in his glass, his own smirk mirroring hers. "The man loves his jokes. Just play along, Eleanor." But I didn't laugh. I couldn't. I looked at Grandpa Arthur, really looked at him. He looked tired, profoundly tired. "Thank you, Grandpa," I said, my voice quiet, almost lost in their performative amusement. I tucked the envelope deep into the pocket of my coat. My parents, already engrossed in conversation about their new luxury car, never even noticed. They just assumed it was another one of his harmless games, another eccentric joke from an old man. They had no idea, and honestly, neither did I. Not fully. The next morning, though, something compelled me. A strange, unsettling pull. I found myself walking into the bank, a knot of unease twisting in my stomach, like I was about to do something utterly wrong. I handed the check to the teller. She was quiet for an unnervingly long time, her eyes scanning the paper. Then she looked up, her expression professional, clear and utterly calm. "Your deposit cleared, Miss Vance." Just like that. With those 5 words, it wasn't a joke anymore. My name is Eleanor Vance, and I'm 30 years old. To truly grasp the seismic shift that happened with that check, you need to understand my family. You need to understand my parents, Robert and Michelle Vance, and the kind of house I grew up in. My parents, above all else, cared about one thing, appearing perfect. Their entire existence was a relentless pursuit of image. We lived in a grand, beautiful house in a neighborhood where every house was a monument to flawless aspiration. Lawns were pristine, cars were always new, sparkling monuments to success. My mother, Michelle, had chosen our house specifically because of its sweeping, winding staircase. "It's so impressive, Eleanor," she declared. "Perfect for first impressions." The inside was just as impressive and just as cold. We had a living room that was strictly off-limits for living. The carpet was pristine white, the sofas the same, covered in expensive, scratchy fabric. My mother had picked them straight from a glossy magazine. "Isn't it elegant, Eleanor?" she'd ask, and I would just nod, a silent, obedient child. I remember, with a chilling clarity, the day I was 8 and accidentally spilled a tiny drop of water on one of those white sofas. The way my mother screamed, you would have thought I'd set the house on fire. She scrubbed at that spot for an entire hour, her face tight, angry, a venomous whisper escaping her lips. "This is why we can't have nice things." But her eyes, cold and hard, were fixed on me. After that, I never dared to enter that room alone again. My childhood wasn't a series of happy memories. It was a series of meticulously orchestrated photo shoots. My mother was obsessive about our family photos. Every Christmas, every Easter, every single vacation. We had to pose. We had to look happy. We had to look perfect. I recall one Christmas photo when I was 12. Michelle had bought us all matching, brutally itchy red sweaters. I was frowning, my discomfort etched on my face. "Eleanor, smile." My dad, Robert, snapped, standing by the fireplace, one hand casually in his pocket, practicing his own relaxed smile for the camera. "It's itchy," I mumbled. "Stop it," my mother hissed, her voice low and dangerously sharp. She grabbed my shoulders, her grip tight, and spun me to face the camera. "Your father and I work hard to give you this life. The least you can do is look grateful for one picture. Now smile." So I did. A fake, tight smile that didn't reach my eyes. In the photo, my eyes looked sad, utterly defeated. My mother, of course, adored that picture. "We look like we're from a magazine," she'd gush, framing it and placing it on the grand piano, a testament to her perfect life. The hard work was their favorite refrain. "We've worked so hard for this life," they'd announce at the endless parties they hosted. Their perfect house would fill with loud, fake laughter, the cloying scent of expensive wine and perfume. My designated role at these gatherings was the perfect, quiet daughter. I'd wear the dress my mother chose, smile politely at the adults, offer to take their coats. Then, the moment no one was looking, I'd slip away to my room, seeking refuge in a book. One evening, a woman I didn't recognize followed me upstairs, looking for the bathroom. She saw me sitting on my bed, immersed in a novel. She offered a small, knowing smile. "Hiding?" she asked softly. I just nodded. She looked around my room, the only space in that vast house that felt truly lived in. Posters adorned the walls. My desk was a beautiful, chaotic mess. "Your parents are a lot," she said, then chuckled, a little embarrassed. "I'm Mrs. Gable." Later, I overheard my mother talking to her by the stairs. "Oh, Eleanor is just so shy," Michelle chirped in her high, bright party voice. "She's in her awkward phase. We're hoping she grows out of it." I wasn't shy. Not really. I just didn't like their friends, their noise, their suffocating fakery. The brutal truth was, my parents' hard work was an elaborate lie. Their perfect house, the gleaming new cars, the lavish parties, even those untouchable white sofas, it all stemmed from one source. It all came from my grandfather, Arthur Vance. Grandpa Arthur was nothing like my parents. He was a self-made man, forged by grit and determination. He started his construction company with just a single truck and 2 ladders, building it into one of the biggest, most respected firms in the state. He was old-school wealthy, the kind of man who still polished his own shoes and read the newspaper, leaving ink smudges on his callous fingers. My dad, Robert, worked at the company. His title was Vice President of Development, but I spent a summer helping. Grandpa with office paperwork, and I saw the numbers. My dad's development mostly involved golfing and taking clients to ridiculously expensive lunches. Grandpa Arthur's company paid for my parents' house. It paid for their cars. It paid for those pristine white carpets. My parents loved Grandpa Arthur's money, but they were deeply embarrassed by him. He was too real, too blunt, too unrefined for their polished world. He wore old-fashioned suits and drank cheap coffee. I remember one party, a man was talking to my father about stocks. Grandpa Arthur walked up. "You don't invest in stocks, Arthur," the man laughed. "No," Grandpa said, his voice deep and steady, cutting through the frivolous chatter. "I invest in steel and concrete and people who show up on time. Things you can touch." The man looked utterly confused. My father's face turned a blotchy red, and he quickly changed the subject. "More wine? Anyone?" Later that night, I overheard my parents arguing in their bedroom. "He humiliated me, Michelle," my father raged, talking about steel and concrete like a common laborer. "I know, Robert, I know." My mother sighed, her voice weary. "He just doesn't understand. He's from a different time. They loved parading him around when it suited their image. My father, the one who built the city," Dad would boast, slinging an arm around Grandpa for a photo op. But they never embraced his values. They never truly listened. They saw him as their own personal bank. A bank that was old, a little fussy, but would always, always provide. They never once thought the bank would close. To my parents, I was their greatest failure, their deepest disappointment. They never said it in those exact words, of course. They were far too polite for such bluntness. Instead, they used euphemisms. "Eleanor is just finding her way," or "she's creative," or their absolute favorite, "she's wasting her potential." Their definition of success was incredibly narrow: a grand house in their neighborhood, A real job, like a doctor, a lawyer, or a vice president of development, and marrying someone who also ticked those boxes. I had none of those things. I lived in a one-bedroom apartment in Portland. It was small, yes. The floors creaked, the kitchen was tiny. My parents absolutely despised it. It's so small. My mother gasped on her first visit, eyeing my comfortable, well-worn sofa as if it carried a contagious disease. And the neighborhood, Eleanor? Do you feel safe here? I love it, Mom. I stated and I meant it. My apartment was mine. The walls were a warm, soft yellow. My design sketches and favorite paintings were pinned up everywhere. My bookshelves overflowed with stories. It was a space for living, for creating, not for showcasing. It was messy. It was comfortable. It was real. My job was their other major problem. I was a freelance interior designer. A decorator. My father had sneered when I told him. A designer, Dad. I corrected him, trying to keep my voice steady. I help people make their homes functional and beautiful. There's no money in paint swatches, Eleanor, he declared, shaking his head. It's a hobby. You wasted a college degree on a hobby. You should have gone to law school. I almost did. They pushed me relentlessly. A law degree is so respectable, my mother urged. Think of the potential. I was miserable. One night, I was crying, trying desperately to study for the entrance exam, when Grandpa Arthur called. You sound terrible, he said immediately. I'm fine, Grandpa, I lied. No, you're not, he countered, his voice gentle but firm. You sound like you're swallowing rocks. What is it? So, I told him everything. I confessed I didn't want to be a lawyer. I told him I longed to make things, to work with color and light and space, to help people create real homes. He was quiet for what felt like an eternity. I braced myself for his anger, for the familiar disappointment. All right, he finally said, a gruff note in his voice. Come over on Saturday. We're old clothes. When I arrived at his house, he didn't lead me to the living room. Instead, he took me to his workshop in the garage. It was a vast, dusty space, smelling of sawdust and oil. He pointed to a haphazard pile of old wood in the corner. I need a table for my entryway, he announced. Let's build one. We spent the entire weekend in that garage. He didn't just instruct me, he taught me. He showed me how to measure, how to cut, the nuances of different types of wood, the importance of grain, the strength of proper joints. It's not about the paint, Eleanor, he said, running his calloused hand over a piece of smooth sanded oak. The paint is the easy part. It's about the bones, the foundation. If the joints are weak, the table will fall, no matter how pretty the paint is. My hands were raw, calloused, my hair dusted with sawdust. I had never been happier. When we finished, we had created a small, simple, beautiful table. It was strong. That's real work, Eleanor, he said, placing a heavy hand on my shoulder. Honest work. Don't you ever let anyone tell you different. I still have that table. It's in my tiny apartment, my keys resting on it every day. It's the most valuable thing I own. Grandpa Arthur was the only one who truly understood me. He was the only one who asked about my work, not my salary. What problem are you solving today, Eleanor? He'd ask on our calls. I'd tell him about a cramped apartment desperately needing storage, or a young family with no budget for a nursery. And what did you do? He'd prompt. I'd share my ideas, building a bench with hidden storage, painting walls a specific color to expand a small room. Good, he'd grunt. Smart. Honest. That's my girl. He was the only one who saw me. My parents saw wasted potential. Grandpa Arthur saw my work, my actual contribution to the world. He had a saying, one I heard often, usually after he'd observed someone being particularly rude, flashy, or fake. He'd watch them, his eyes piercing, then turn to me and say, Money doesn't test people, Eleanor. Gratitude does. I didn't fully grasp what he meant then. I just thought it was another one of Grandpa's wise sayings. What do you mean, Grandpa? I once asked him at a diner. He'd just left a 50% tip for our exhausted waitress. You watch how people treat those they don't need, he explained, sipping his black coffee. You watch how they say thank you. You watch if they mean it. A person can have all the money in the world, but if they aren't grateful, they're poor. They're just an empty room. I nodded, thinking I understood. I didn't. Not really. I never realized that all those years, he wasn't just teaching me, he was watching me, and he was watching my parents. He always said, "Money doesn't test people. Gratitude does." I just never realized that our Christmas dinner, that quiet moment with the envelopes, was the final test. The room smelled like pine and roasted duck. It was Christmas dinner at my parents' house, of course. My mother, Michelle, had been planning the menu for weeks. The long, dark wood table was polished to a mirror shine, set with her finest china, each plate edged in thin gold leaf. Crystal glasses caught the candlelight, scattering tiny rainbows across the white walls. The centerpiece was a towering mountain of pine boughs, silver balls, and red berries, so massive I could barely see my dad, Robert, sitting across from me. The atmosphere, as always, was stiff. Christmas with my parents was never fun. It was a rigidly choreographed performance. Michelle wore a striking red silk dress, her hair perfectly coiffed, but her smile was strained, etched with worry. "Robert, do you think the duck is too dry?" she whispered to my dad. "It's fine, Michelle." "Everything is fine," he mumbled, but his gaze was fixed on his phone, hidden beneath the table, no doubt checking the stock market. "I just want everything to be perfect for your father," she insisted. Grandpa Arthur sat at the head of the table, looking small in the huge high-backed chair. He wore an old, dark green wool sweater, clean but definitely old. I saw my mother's quick, disapproving glance. I knew she considered it entirely inappropriate for her perfect Christmas tableau. I, as usual, was trying to be invisible, clad in a simple black dress, sipping water, counting the minutes until I could escape back to my small, quiet apartment. The conversation revolved, predictably, around my parents. Our trip to Aspen was just divine. My mother gushed to Grandpa Arthur. "We're thinking of buying a small place there." "Oh," Grandpa said, his duck untouched. "You have a place here?" "Oh, Dad." Mom laughed, that high, tinkling, fake laugh. "It's an investment. Robert is so smart about investments." "Is that right, Robert?" Grandpa inquired, his voice even. "The market is very strong, Arthur." My dad puffed out his chest. "You have to know when to move." I watched Grandpa Arthur. He just nodded slowly, took a deliberate bite of duck, chewed, and looked utterly weary. After the main course, Michelle cleared the plates, bringing out a decadent dessert, something with chocolate and gold flakes. Then, Grandpa Arthur cleared his throat. It was a small sound, but in that vast, silent room, it resonated like a drum. "I have something for you," he announced. My parents froze, turning their gazes to him. He reached into his pocket and produced 3 plain, white business-sized envelopes. He slid one to my dad, one to my mom, and one, traveling down the long table, to me. "A little Christmas gift for each of you," he repeated, his voice soft. My parents looked at each other, then burst into laughter. Michelle's high, tinkling party laugh filled the air first. "Oh, Dad," she chirped, picking up the envelope but not opening it. "You're still playing Santa, huh? This is so cute." She fanned herself with the envelope. "What is it this year?" "A check for $1 million, I love yous." My dad, Robert, chuckled, his smirk firmly in place. He picked up his envelope, tapping it on the table. "The man loves his jokes," he said, looking at me. "Just play along, Eleanor. He loves it." He didn't open his either, just set it beside his wine glass as if it were a napkin. I didn't laugh. I looked at Grandpa Arthur, and he was looking at me. His eyes, I will never, ever forget his eyes. They weren't twinkling with holiday cheer. They were sad, deeply, profoundly sad. He looked utterly exhausted. He watched my mother laugh at his gift, watched my father dismiss it. Then his eyes found mine. I reached out, picked up my envelope. "Thank you, Grandpa," I said, my voice barely a whisper. He held my gaze, and for just a second, he nodded. A tiny, almost imperceptible nod. And before he looked away, he said something so softly my parents never heard it. "Keep it safe." My heart did a strange, tight little flip. Keep it safe. What did that mean? I held the envelope in my lap. It felt heavy, important. My mother had already forgotten hers, leaving it on the sideboard next to a stack of dirty dessert plates, already chattering about her New Year's Eve party plans. My dad had tucked his into his suit jacket pocket, probably without even a thought, like a business card he intended to discard. The joke was over. The performance continued. I slipped my envelope into my coat pocket, my fingers wrapping around it. I didn't understand what was happening, not yet. But deep in my bones, I knew something had just irrevocably broken. I sat there at that perfect, polished table, and I felt the crack. The foundation was giving way. When I left, I hugged Grandpa Arthur goodbye. His hug was tighter than usual. He held on for an extra second. "Drive careful, Eleanor," he said into my hair. "I will, Grandpa." "I love you." "I love you too, child," he whispered back. "You're a good girl. You're real." My parents waved from their perfectly lit doorway, the chandelier lights spilling onto the perfect lawn. "Merry Christmas," my mother called. "Don't forget to call your aunt." They were already closing the door, already moving on. I sat in my cold car for a full minute, my hand in my pocket, clutching that white envelope. It didn't feel like a joke at all. The drive back to my apartment in Portland was quiet, the streets mostly empty. Christmas lights blurred past my windows, red and green and blue, a festive blur against the cold reality. My car's heater was broken, so I shivered, one hand on the wheel, the other still wrapped around the envelope in my coat pocket. "Keep it safe." His words echoed in my head. So cute. My mother's laugh echoed too. "The man loves his jokes," my father's smirk. I felt sick. A cold, heavy anger settled in my stomach. They hadn't even opened them. They hadn't even looked. They had laughed at him, at his gift, right to his face. When I reached my building, I practically ran up the stairs, desperate to be in my own space. I locked the door behind me, leaning against it, breathing hard. My apartment was messy and warm. I turned on a single lamp, shed my coat, tossing it onto my worn-out sofa. My hands trembling slightly, I made a cup of tea. I sat on the floor, my back against the couch, staring at the envelope on my coffee table. Just a plain, white business envelope. My name, Eleanor Vance, was written on the front in his strong, familiar hand. I stared at it for a long, long time. Part of me was terrified to open it. What if it was just a joke? What if it was a fake check for 1,000,000 hugs? After all the drama, the heavy feeling, I would feel so incredibly stupid. But what if it was real? I picked it up, my fingers tracing the sealed flap. I slid my finger under it, carefully, not wanting to rip the paper. I pulled out the contents. It was a check, a real cashier's check, from his personal bank. My eyes darted to the pay to the order of line, Eleanor Vance. Then to the small box with the numbers. My breath hitched. $100,500. $100,500. I read it again, and again. The signature at the bottom was unmistakably his, Arthur Vance. It was real. I sat there on my floor, in my tiny apartment, and just stared. My chest felt tight, constricted. I think I was supposed to be happy. I think I was supposed to be excited, jumping up and down, shrieking. I'm rich. But I felt none of that. Instead, an incredible, crushing weight settled over me. This wasn't just a gift. This was a statement. This was a test. And my parents had failed. He had given them the same envelope, the same chance. And they had laughed. They had tossed it aside like garbage. He knew. He knew they would. He had given me one too. And I had said, thank you. This wasn't a test of me. It was a test of them. He was simply showing me the results. A sudden, hot wave of respect for my grandfather washed over me, so sharp it almost hurt. He was smarter than all of them. He was stronger. And I felt a deep, cold sadness. For my parents. They were so blind, so utterly lost in their world of white carpets and potential that they couldn't recognize a real thing when it was staring them in the face. I didn't know what to do with the check. Cashing it felt wrong. It felt too much about money, and this wasn't about money. It was about something far deeper. I rose, walked to my desk. On it sat a small, dark wooden box with a smooth lid, the table I had built with Grandpa Arthur in his workshop. I kept my real treasures in it. I opened the lid. The scent of cedar and old paper filled the air. Inside there wasn't much. A photo of Grandpa and me, covered in sawdust, grinning. A letter from my best friend, Chloe, when I moved to Portland, telling me, "You are brave." A small, pressed flower from the first bouquet a client ever gave me. Things that mattered. I took the check, folded it once, and placed it inside the box, right on top of the photo. I closed the lid. It felt right. It was safe. It was where it belonged. It was a symbol of respect. It was proof that he saw me. I didn't sleep that night. My mind raced. What should I do? The next morning, I woke feeling utterly hungover. I made coffee, my gaze fixed on the wooden box. $100,000. That was a life-changing amount of money. It could pay off my student loans. It could finally let me rent a proper design studio. It could give me security, something I'd never truly had. Then a new thought crept in, small and ugly. What if my parents were right? What if it was a game? What if this was the real test? What if he was waiting to see what I would do? If I cashed it immediately, would that make me greedy? Would I be just as bad as them? But if I didn't cash it, would I be disrespecting his gift? Would I be a fool? I felt utterly confused, trapped in a riddle. I had to know. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about knowing if this was real. Was this entire crazy thing actually happening, or was I imagining it all? Curiosity might have gotten the better of me, but it was more than that. It was a desperate need for truth. I told myself I wasn't cashing it. I was just checking. I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app. My hands trembled so violently I could barely log in. I took the check out of the box, feeling a strange sense of betrayal as I laid it flat on the table. Mobile deposit. I took a picture of the front. My hand shook. The image was blurry. I tried again. I snapped a picture of the back. For mobile deposit only. The app spun for a moment. Deposit submitted for $100,500. I felt sick. I put the check back in the wooden box, closed the lid. I felt small. I felt like I had taken this beautiful, heavy symbol of respect and tried to turn it into mere money. I felt like my parents. The next few hours were sheer torture. I sat on my sofa, staring at my phone. I tried to work, but my hands wouldn't obey. Every time my phone buzzed, I jumped. I was waiting for the deposit failed email. I was waiting for the insufficient funds notice. I was waiting for a just kidding text from Grandpa Arthur. I was waiting for a sign, waiting to discover what was real. The words, submitted, just hung there on my phone screen. I put the phone face down on my coffee table. I felt dirty. Cheap. What had I done? I had taken his gift, his test, and treated it like a lottery ticket. I went to the kitchen and scrubbed my hands, but the feeling wouldn't go away. I spent the next hour pacing my apartment. It would be rejected, I told myself. The bank would send that deposit failed email. Then I would know. I would know it was all a game, and I would put the check back in the box and never look at it again. That would be the end of it. I was almost hoping it would fail. My phone remained silent. The silence was deafening. After another hour, I couldn't take it anymore. I picked up the phone. My banking app was still open. I refreshed the page. My heart stopped. It didn't just stop. It felt like it was grabbed and squeezed. The pending status was gone. The check was listed under completed transactions. And my account balance, the number at the top of the screen, it had changed. I was looking at a number with 5 zeros at the end. It was real. The deposit hadn't failed. It hadn't been stopped. It wasn't a joke. It was real. Your deposit has cleared. The teller's words echoed in my head, but the app was right there, staring me in the face. It was just a number on a screen, but it felt like a mountain had just landed in my living room. My hands shook so hard I dropped the phone onto the couch. It was real. I sat down, burying my face in my hands. I wasn't happy. I was terrified, because if my check was real, it meant their checks were real too. And they had laughed. They had left them on the table. Oh God. I didn't know what to do. Should I call them? Mom, Dad, that check you laughed at? It was real. Should I call Grandpa? Grandpa, why did you do this? I did nothing. I just sat there, frozen. The number on my phone screen felt like it was burning a hole through my apartment floor. I sat there for maybe 10 minutes, maybe an hour, I don't know. Then my phone rang. The screen lit up. Mom. My blood turned to ice. This was it. The other shoe. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times. I wiped my sweaty hand on my jeans and picked it up. Hello. My voice was a tiny, fragile whisper. Eleanor, why didn't you pick up? Her voice was high and tight. sharp, unlike my usual mom. I was in the bathroom, Mom. Well, I'll tell you what's up. I just had the most mortifying experience of my life. I stayed quiet, listening to her unravel. Your father and I were just, cleaning up from Christmas, she stammered, trying to sound casual, but failing spectacularly. And I found that envelope your grandfather gave me, the one he gave your father too. We were laughing about it still. We thought, oh, what the heck? Let's see what the joke is. So, I called the bank, just to ask the manager. Her voice began to tremble. The manager said the checks were stopped. He said your grandfather had put a stop payment on them yesterday morning. She was talking so fast she was running out of breath, her words laced with fury. He humiliated me, Eleanor. How could he? I still said nothing. My mind raced, searching for words that wouldn't come. Did you talk to your grandfather today? She asked, her voice suddenly cold, suspicious. No, why? Don't lie to me, Eleanor. I'm not lying, Mom. There was a long, cold silence. I could hear her ragged breathing. The bank manager, she said, her voice now dangerously low, said that one check did go through. A large one. This morning. She paused, letting the implication hang heavy in the air. Ours were stopped, but yours went through. I couldn't speak. My throat was utterly closed. He's playing favorites again, she shrieked. The sudden volume made me flinch. It was a sound I hadn't heard in years, a sound from my childhood, the scream over the spilled water on the white sofa. It was raw, ugly jealousy. After everything we do for him, we host him, we take care of him, we manage his life. And you show up twice a year and he gives you, what did he give you, Eleanor? Mom, I started, but she cut me off. This is ridiculous, she snapped. I'm putting your father on. I heard fumbling, then my dad's angry, muffled voice. Just give me the phone, Michelle. Eleanor, he barked, his voice laced with venom. Hi, Dad. Don't hide at me. Your mother is hysterical. You should have told us. Told you. What? I whispered, my voice barely audible. That you knew. That you knew the check was real. You went behind our backs. You cashed it, didn't you? You scurried off to the bank first thing in the morning like a little thief. I didn't. I tried to protest. His voice changed then, a sudden shift. He was trying to sound reasonable now, paternal, using the tone he reserved for handling a problem. He's old, Eleanor. He's old, and he's not thinking clearly. He doesn't know what he's doing. I thought of Grandpa Arthur's eyes at Christmas, clear, sad, steady. He's playing games, and you fell for it. And you've created a huge problem for this family. I didn't create anything, I said, my voice suddenly clear and cold, cutting through his bluster. Listen to me, Eleanor. That money is not yours. It's family money. Your grandfather is confused. You need to come here, and we're going to sort this out. We will put the money into a joint account. We will manage it for you. It's the only fair thing to do. You don't understand finances. You'll just waste it on your hobby. It's not a hobby, I retorted, my voice rising. This is not up for debate, he shouted, his anger returning full force. You have put this family in a terrible position. You should have told us. You laughed at it, I said, the words finally tumbling out. You didn't even open it. You called it a joke. There was a long, terrible silence. I had spoken the truth, the one thing they couldn't argue with. My father's voice, when it returned, was flat and cold, colder than I had ever heard it. He's an old, senile man, Eleanor, and you are a very, very foolish girl. He hung up. I sat there, the phone still pressed to my ear, the dial tone buzzing like a cruel laugh. He's old. He doesn't know what he's doing. I looked at the number in my bank account. I looked at the wooden box on my desk, the one I had built with him. Money doesn't test people. Gratitude does. My parents were wrong. I knew, with a sudden, terrible clarity, that my grandfather knew exactly what he was doing. The next 2 days were the longest of my life. I was a ghost in my own apartment. I didn't answer my phone. I didn't check my email. My parents called again and again and again. Their names flashed on the screen, Mom or Dad, and I would just watch, my stomach twisting, until it went to voicemail. They left messages. My mother's were first, tearful and pleading. Eleanor, darling, please call me. We're just worried about you. Your father was upset. He didn't mean it. We just want to talk. This is all a misunderstanding. My father's messages were different. Short and angry. Eleanor, stop this childish behavior. Call me now. Then the text started. We know you're there. This is irresponsible. You are tearing this family apart. Me. I was tearing the family apart. Not their greed. Not their laughter. Me. I turned my phone off. The silence was better, but it was also worse. The $100,000 sat in my checking account, feeling like a bomb. I was terrified to touch it, terrified to even look at it. I bought groceries with my credit card. I didn't want to use that money. It didn't feel like my money. It felt like evidence. I couldn't work. I sat at my design table and stared at a blank page, tried to sketch, but my hands were still shaking. The colors all looked wrong. Everything looked gray. I was alone. I was rich, I guess, and I had never felt more alone in my life. On the second day, I couldn't take it anymore. I turned my phone on, ignoring the dozen new messages from my parents. I called the only person I could. Chloe. Eleanor, oh my God, are you alive? I was about to call the police. Chloe Harper, my best friend since college. She was my polar opposite. Loud, funny, and utterly fearless. She was a lawyer. A real one, as my father would say, working for legal aid, helping people who had nothing. My parents despised her, calling her aggressive and a bad influence. I'm not okay, Chloe, I whispered, feeling the first hot tears start. I hadn't cried yet. Where are you? I'm coming over. No. I need to get out of here. Can I meet you? We met at our favorite diner, an old, comforting place that smelled of coffee and bacon. I slid into a booth in the back, my hands wrapped around a hot mug of tea. Chloe slid in across from me, her sharp, dark eyes scanning my face. Okay, she said, all business. You look like hell. Start from the top. What did they do? So I told her. Everything. The dinner, their dismissive laughter, the pretend check. My parents' disgust. Grandpa Arthur's sad eyes, his words, keep it safe. Chloe just listened, her face growing tighter and tighter with each detail. Then I told her about the next morning. The deposit. The number. Chloe's eyes went wide. $100,000, Eleanor. Sure. I hissed, looking around the diner. Holy! She whispered, her voice hushed but incredulous. Then I told her about the phone calls, my mother's mortifying experience, the stopped checks, my father's foolish girl indictment. By the time I finished, I was crying quiet, exhausted tears rolling down my face. Chloe was silent, staring intently into her coffee cup. Chloe! I prodded gently. She looked up, her face not sad, but absolutely furious. Chloe, don't. I'm going to kill them, she said, her voice a low growl. I am. I'm a lawyer. I can find a way to make it legal. You are tearing this family apart, I muttered, echoing my parents' accusation. They are not a family, Eleanor, she shot back. They are a corporation. And you just messed with their bottom line. It's not funny, Chloe. I'm not laughing, she snapped, her eyes blazing. I am furious. They've been treating you like this your entire life, like you're the broken, weird one, just because you're decent. And now your grandpa finally calls them on it. He finally shows you what you're worth, and they call you a thief for being grateful. I don't know what to do, I whispered, feeling the fear creeping back in. I'm so scared. Scared of what? Them, Eleanor. They can't do anything. It's your name on the check. It's in your account. It's your money. Game over. It's not about the money, I insisted a little too loud. It's him. It's Grandpa. What did I just do? Did I just get him in trouble? Is he okay? What if my dad is right? What if he's not well? Chloe's face softened. She reached across the table and grabbed my hand, her grip warm and strong. Eleanor, look at me. Your grandfather is a genius. He is the smartest one in this whole mess. He's not old and confused. He's strategic. He knew exactly what they would do. He's been watching them. He's been watching you. This wasn't a gift of money, Eleanor. It was a gift of truth. I took a shaky breath. So what do I do now? Nothing, she said, her voice firm. You live your life. You pay off your loans. You rent that studio you've been dreaming about. You use it. That's the best thank you can give him. And you block your parents' numbers. I can't do that. Okay, fine, she sighed. Baby steps. Just wait. Wait for the next move. I drove home feeling not better, but definitely stronger. Chloe had put some much-needed steel in my spine. He's a genius. It was a gift of truth. I reached my apartment, checked my mailbox, and there it was. Not a business envelope. This was thick, heavy, cream-colored cardstock. My name, Eleanor, written on the front in my grandfather's distinct handwriting, that strong, clear, old-fashioned script. My heart jumped back into my throat. This was it. I went upstairs, my keys shaking in my hand, and sat on my sofa. I opened it. There was no letter, no lengthy explanation, just a single card, as thick and elegant as the envelope itself. It was printed, not handwritten. Dinner Saturday, 7 p.m. Underneath, his home address. Not my parents' house. His. That was it. My blood ran cold. This was the next move. This was the showdown. I called Chloe. He invited me to dinner. I said, my voice tight. Saturday. Okay, she said, her voice cautious. Just you. I think so. It just has the time and place. So what? Chloe asked, her voice taking on that lawyerly edge. You think he's about to confront them? Is he going to have them there? Is this an ambush? I looked at the simple, elegant card. Dinner, Saturday, 7 p.m. I thought about the stop checks. I thought about the $100,000 now sitting in my bank account. I thought about the decades of watching and listening and testing. A calm, cold, sad feeling settled over me. No, Chloe, I said quietly, staring at the card. I don't think he's about to confront them. Then what? I think he already did. I think the test is over. This is him announcing the results. The drive to my grandfather's house on Saturday night was the loneliest drive of my life. My little car felt small on the wide, dark roads that led to his neighborhood. My parents lived in a new, flashy development. Grandpa Arthur lived in the old, original wealthy part of town. His house wasn't a modern white and glass box like my parents'. It was a 30-year-old brick house, solid and timeless and real. It was set back from the road, hidden by ancient, sprawling oak trees. I parked my car behind a row of other, much more expensive cars. I recognized my parents' silver Mercedes. My stomach plummeted. They were here. This wasn't just announcing the results. This was an execution. And I didn't know if I was the guest of honor or the main course. I walked to the front door, my heart hammering against my ribs. I thought about turning around, about getting in my car, driving back to Portland, and never speaking to any of them again. But then I thought of Grandpa Arthur, his sad eyes. Keep it safe. I had to see this through. I rang the doorbell. The door opened almost immediately. It wasn't Grandpa. It was Elena, his housekeeper, who had worked for him for as long as I could remember. She smiled, a warm, genuine smile. Eleanor, he is waiting for you in the study. Are my parents here? I whispered. Elena's smile faded slightly. They are in the dining room, she said, her tone confirming my worst fears. She led me down the hall. My parents' house was all white walls and harsh, bright lights. Grandpa Arthur's house was warm, lined with books. The floors were dark wood, covered in old, beautiful rugs. It smelled like old books, wood polish, and the faint, sweet scent of his pipe tobacco. It smelled like home. Elena opened the study doors. Grandpa Arthur was sitting behind his huge, dark desk, not working, just sitting, his hands folded waiting for me. Hello, Eleanor, he said, his voice calm, steady. Grandpa, I managed, wanting to run to him, to cry, to ask a million questions. I just stood there. You look nervous, he observed. I am. Don't be, he said. You've done nothing wrong. Sit down. I sank into the big, leather chair across from his desk. He looked at me, his eyes clear and sharp. You got my invitation? I nodded. They're here, aren't they? Yes, he confirmed. They are. Now, before we go in there, I want you to know something. What happens in that room tonight has nothing to do with you. It is not your fault. It is not your problem. This is between me and them. It has been for 30 years. Your only job tonight is to be quiet and to be real. Can you do that? Be real. Just be yourself, Eleanor. That's all you've ever been. It's all I've ever asked. He stood up. He was an old man, but he stood up straight, powerful. He was wearing a dark suit tonight, not his usual old sweater. "Let's go to dinner," he said, placing a hand on my back as we walked out of the study. We walked down the hall to the dining room, and I felt like I was stepping into a nightmare. My parents stood by the fireplace, not speaking. My mother, Michelle, was in a black dress, too expensive, her smile stiff, stretched so tight I thought her face might crack. Her eyes were red-rimmed. My father, Robert, stood with his hands in his pockets, staring into the unlit fireplace, his face tight with anger, a dark, blotchy red. They both turned as we entered. My mother's eyes flew to me. Her smile wobbled. "Eleanor, you came." She then looked at Grandpa. "Dad, this is a surprise." "Is it?" Grandpa Arthur asked, his voice impossibly calm. He walked to the head of the table. "Please sit." My parents sat on one side. I sat on the other alone. Grandpa Arthur remained standing at the head of the table. He wasn't carrying a platter of food. He held a thin, legal folder made of beige cardstock. He set it down in front of him. The sound was soft, but it echoed in the profound silence of the room. "You'll each find your name on these papers," he said, not looking at the folder, but directly at my parents. My mother's voice cracked. She burst into tears. But these weren't tears of sadness. They were angry, frustrated tears. "You humiliated us, Dad," she cried, her voice rising shrill. "You stopped our checks. You made us look like fools after all we've done for you." "What have you done for me, Michelle?" Grandpa Arthur asked, his voice still quiet, still calm, cutting through her sobs like a razor. She stopped, mouth agape. Oui. I did stop the checks," Grandpa said, nodding calmly. "I did." He looked from my mother to my father. "For 30 years, I have given you everything. A house, cars, a job you don't do, an allowance for a woman your age. I have given, and you have taken, and you have not once, said thank you and meant it." "That's not true," my father interjected, finding his voice. "At Christmas," Grandpa continued, as if my father hadn't spoken, "I gave you a final gift, a simple test. I gave you the same thing I gave Eleanor." My parents both looked at me, my mother's gaze pure venom. "I gave you a check, a real one, a gift, and you laughed. You laughed at me. You threw it on the sideboard with the garbage. You rolled your eyes, Michelle. You smirked, Robert. You called me a joke." His voice was so calm, so measured, that it was terrifying. He wasn't yelling. He was simply stating immutable facts. "You laughed at a gift, so you laughed at me." "It was a test," my father shouted, slamming his fist on the table. The crystal glasses rattled violently. A sick, twisted old man's game. "Life is a test, Robert," Grandpa Arthur countered, his voice steady. "You failed. And her," my father yelled, pointing a furious finger at me, a vein throbbing purple in his forehead. "You rewarded her for what? For doing nothing. For being a failure. For wasting her potential. She's done nothing." The room fell silent, heavy with accusation. I could feel all their eyes on me, shrinking me, making me feel small, like I was 12 again in that itchy red sweater. I looked at my grandfather. He was still looking at my dad. "She did everything," Grandpa Arthur said, his voice so quiet, yet so filled with immense power I almost wept. "She did everything," he repeated. "She listened. When I spoke, she listened. When I taught her, she learned. She works. She builds. She respects herself. She said, 'Thank you,' for a gift she didn't even know was real." He turned his clear, steady eyes on me. "She didn't laugh." The silence that followed felt sacred. That's the only word for it. It was the sound of a 30-year-long lie finally dying. It was the sound of truth, stark and unyielding, filling a room that had always been about pretense. My father's face was ashen. My mother was utterly, completely silent, her mouth agape. They had nothing left to say. He had taken all their words away. My grandfather, Arthur Vance, did not move. He stood at the head of his table, a king in his own home. My father's fist remained on the table. My mother's face was pale and blotchy. Grandpa Arthur finally picked up the thin beige folder. He opened it, then slid it across the polished wood table. It stopped right in front of me. "This is yours, Eleanor," he said. I looked down, my hands in my lap, afraid to touch it. My father leaned forward, squinting. "What is that? What is this?" "More games." I placed my hands on the folder, slowly opened it. It was not a check. It was paper after paper of legal documents. My eyes scanned the words, not fully comprehending all of them, but certain phrases jumped out. Last will and testament of Arthur Vance. Durable power of attorney. Transfer of first deed. Articles of incorporation for Vance Construction. And on every single page, in the places for executive or beneficiary or trustee, I saw my name, Eleanor Vance. My breath left my body. This wasn't the $100,000. This was everything. This was the company, the house, the trust. "What is that?" my mother whispered, her face pale, sick. "What is that, Eleanor?" she asked again, her voice rising in a desperate plea. I couldn't speak. I just looked at my grandfather. "It's my estate, Michelle," Grandpa Arthur said calmly. "It's my legacy." You can't do that," my mother stammered. "You can't. Robert is your son. He's the vice president. It's his." "Robert has a title," Grandpa Arthur corrected her, his voice devoid of emotion. "He does not have the job. He has never done the job. He has a salary which I have paid." "You can't do this," my father roared, standing up, his chair scraping violently on the wood floor. "I'm your son. She's a child. She doesn't know anything." "She knows how to work," Grandpa Arthur said, his gaze fixed on my father. "She knows how to listen. She knows how to build." "This is illegal," my father yelled, his voice cracking. "You're old. You're senile. She tricked you. She manipulated you." He looked around the room, desperate, searching for someone to agree with him. "You're not well, Dad. You're sick. You need help. We're going to get you help." My mother suddenly caught on, her face shifting into a mask of worried concern. "Yes, Dad. You're not thinking clearly. This test, it's not normal. We're worried about you." They were trying to take his power, trying to label him as crazy. I watched, horrified, as they tried to turn this against him. Grandpa Arthur just watched them. He let them talk, let my father rant, let my mother cry her fake, worried tears. He let the silence stretch out after they were done, after they had said all the ugly, desperate things they could conjure. My father was breathing hard, his suit jacket bunched up. My mother dabbed her eyes with a napkin, her face a performance of concern. Grandpa Arthur waited. Then he spoke, and his voice was not the voice of a senile old man. It was the voice of a man who built a company from a single truck. It was steel. "I am not sick, Robert. I am not confused, Michelle. I have never seen more clearly in my entire life." He looked at my father, then at my mother. "I already have," he stated. My mother looked confused. Have what?" "You said I can't do this," Grandpa Arthur said. "I'm telling you I already have. The papers are signed. They're filed. My lawyer, Mr. Vance, has the originals. These are your copies. It is done." My father's face collapsed. The anger, the bluster, it just died. He looked old. He looked weak. He looked like an empty room. He sank back into his chair. He started to speak, his mouth opening, a small choke sound escaping. "But," Grandpa Arthur's voice cut through the air, not loud, but utterly final. He looked at his son. He looked at his daughter-in-law. "Now I know who's real." That was it. That sentence. Just 5 words. But it was the end. It ended everything false in that room. It ended 30 years of lies. It ended the perfect image. It ended the hard work. It ended them. My mother stood up, her movements stiff, robotic. She picked up her purse. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at Grandpa. She just walked to the door. My father sat there for another second, his eyes fixed on the folder in front of me, then on his father. His eyes were full of something I had never seen before. It wasn't anger. It was hate. A deep, cold, empty hate. Then he stood up, straightened his suit jacket, and followed his wife out of the room. We just sat there. We heard the front door open. We heard it slam shut. The slam echoed through the big, quiet, solid house. And then there was peace. We sat in the silence. I was still staring at the open folder. Executor, trustee, Eleanor Vance. My hands were shaking. I was rich. I was in charge of everything. I looked at my grandfather. He was still standing. He looked tired. He looked old. But he looked free. He let out a long, shuddering breath, a sound that felt like it had been held in for 30 years. Well, he said, his voice soft now, I suppose Elena has kept dinner warm. He sat down, picked up the small bell by his plate and rang it. I just stared at him. Grandpa, I whispered, my voice broken. I can't. Can't what? He asked, a hint of his old spark in his eyes. I don't know how to do this, I confessed. The company, the trust. I'm a designer. I paint walls. I don't know how to run a construction company. Elena came in, pushing a cart. She didn't look surprised that my parents were gone. She simply began setting out plates. Roasted chicken, vegetables, warm bread. Grandpa Arthur looked at me. He smiled, a real warm smile. I taught you how to build a table, didn't I? Yes, I said. You started with a pile of wood. You measured. You cut. You learned the joints. You learned the bones. It's the same thing, Eleanor. Just a bigger table. He placed a piece of chicken on my plate. We'll hire people to do the parts you don't know. You just be the boss. You just be real. You'll be fine. You're the only one I trust to be. We ate dinner, just the two of us at that long, polished table. We didn't talk about money. We didn't talk about my parents. We didn't talk about the folder, which I had closed and placed on the chair next to me. He asked me about my work. Tell me about that project you were working on, he said. The one for the new family and the small apartment, the nursery. That's the one. And so I told him. I described building a crib with storage drawers underneath, finding a soft yellow color that made the tiny room feel sunny and expansive. He listened, he nodded. Smart, he said. Good bones. We talked about spring planting. He wanted to plant new rose bushes along the front walk. I suggested colors. We talked like we always had, about real things. After dinner, we had coffee in the study. Before I left, he walked me to the door. I'm scared, Grandpa, I admitted, my voice quiet. I know, he said, placing his heavy, warm hand on my shoulder. That's why I know you're the right one. The ones who aren't scared, they're the problem. He reached into his pocket and handed me a small, folded piece of paper. Not a check, just a note. Read this later, he instructed. He hugged me tight. Drive safe, Eleanor. I drove home, feeling them floating. I got to my apartment, sat on my sofa. I opened the note. His handwriting. Money changes hands every day. Respect only once. I cried. I finally cried. Not for my parents. Not for the money. I cried for him. For his long, lonely life, watching his family turn into fakes. I cried because he saw me. A week later, I sat in a big, polished office. The sign on the door read, Vance, Miller and Associates. Julian Vance was a kind man with glasses and a gentle smile, reminding me a little of my grandfather. Your grandfather is a very, very smart man, Eleanor, he said as I signed my name, page after page. He's put a lot of trust in you. I know, I replied, my hand steady. The numbers didn't matter. The money was just money, a tool, a result. The lesson, that mattered. I'm still a designer. I have a beautiful studio now, a real one, and I hire other young designers, paying them well. I'm also the boss of Vance Construction. I sit at a big table in a boardroom. I listen. I learn. I make decisions. It's just a bigger table, built on solid foundations. I never heard from my parents directly again. Their lawyers sent letters, of course. They tried to contest the will, claiming Grandpa Arthur was senile and under undue influence. But Grandpa Arthur was smart. He had been documenting his clear mind for years. He had letters from doctors. He had videos. The case was thrown out. They lost. They lost everything because they had already lost. They thought the check was fake. But the only fake thing in that house that Christmas night was their love. I still drive past that first bank sometimes, the one where I made the deposit. I remember the feeling, the shaking hands, the dread. And I remember the call that changed everything. It wasn't the call from the bank telling me the money was real. It was the call from my father, his voice dripping with disdain, telling me I was a foolish girl. That was the moment. The moment I knew he was wrong. The moment I knew my grandfather was right. The moment I finally understood what I was truly worth. And that decency, quiet and simple and real, was finally worth more than any dollar amount. Call to action. This journey taught me that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the honesty and gratitude you carry. If you've ever found yourself in a situation where loyalty was tested, or someone showed you your true worth when others couldn't, tell me about it. What's the most profound life lesson you've learned about what truly matters? Share your stories and thoughts in the comments below.